take control of error handling with custom exceptions because your app deserves tailored solutions. Welcome everyone. In today's session, we are going to talk about custom exceptions. So without wasting any time further, let's proceed with the video. Now we can create our exceptions that are derived classes of the exception class. So we know exception class is the parent class of all the existing exceptions. But by inheriting this specific class in our own class, we can make our own class as a custom exception. Now creating our exception is known as custom exception or user defined exception. Now most of you might be wondering why we will create a custom exception. Till now we were talking about handling exception and now we are talking about creating exception. So yes, you heard me right. We are talking about creating exceptions and there are plenty of scenarios where creating custom exception is the only way to solve your problem. For example, let's suppose you are building a framework to resolve any specific task. Now later on, other developers are going to utilize this framework to do that specific task. Now let's suppose inside this framework you have created a class which might be utilized by some developer in future. Now this specific class is performing some custom business logic. When the developer is providing some value to this specific class, that time if the value is correct, you want to give the result. If it is not, you want to generate an exception. Similar to that, whenever we are dealing with frameworks, whenever we are dealing with APIs, we are building our own exceptions in that scenario. Now, Apex custom exceptions are used to customize the exception according to the user needs. To create a custom exception class, extend the built-in exception class and implement the name with the word exception. Now, whenever we want to create our own exception class, we just need to make sure that our class should end with the word exception and it should inherit the exception class. Now, throw keyword is a keyword that we will use whenever we want to throw that specific exception. Now, all exceptions extend the system defined base class exception and therefore inherits all common exception method. Hence, all these common exception methods that we discussed in the previous video will be accessible on our own custom exception as well. And also, in case if we need to rethrow the exception, we can certainly do that as well. So, without wasting any time further, let's quickly hit to the org and check out how to create our own exception. So guys, here we are on our developer console and now I am going to create my own custom exception. But before that, let me explain you the scenario where we are going to utilize it. So I am going to create a new class named as contact utility. So let me quickly create that. And inside the contact utility class, I am going to create a constructor. Here you go. Now I have already explained you guys that how to create a constructor in Apex. If you haven't watched that video, you can click on the top right corner and watch that video right now. Now this specific constructor will accept a specific name. Like you can see, it is accepting a last name. Now it will check. So basically what I want is anyone can create an object of this contact utility class and to the constructor can pass a last name. That specific class will search the Salesforce org. If any contact is existing with that specific name, then definitely it will return that specific contact record. And in case if no such contact is existing, then definitely it is going to return none. But instead of returning things, what I am going to do here is inside this class, there will be a contact object. So if any last name or if any contact with that last name is existing, then definitely that contact object will be assigned with that record or else it will throw an exception. Now, why an exception? Now, there is a very valid reason. First of all, we cannot return anything from the constructor. So, you can't return anything from this contact utility constructor. So, how you can inform the developer who is going to use this class? How you are going to inform the developer that this specific contact is not in the record? So, for that specific case, we can certainly use exception. So you can see how I'm going to do it. Okay guys, so you can see I have formed a so-called query over here where I'm fetching the ID, first name, last name, email from contact object where last name is equals to this last name variable and I'm holding it in the list of contacts. And after that I'm just checking whether the contacts list size is greater than 0 or not. If this list size is greater than 0, definitely there is some contact in this, otherwise not. So here I am going to implement the concept of custom exception. So if contact size is greater than 0, then no issues. I already created a contact record. All that I need to do is this dot record is equals to contacts dot get and whatsoever contact is at the 0th element. And otherwise here I have to throw an exception. Now to throw an exception, what you need to do, you need to create a class that should extend or inherit exception class. So definitely I can create an external class, but what I'm doing here is I'm going to create an internal class over here. So definitely we can create a class inside a class in Apex. So here I'm creating another class and I'm naming it as contact exception. So I'm creating public class contact exception, and this class should inherit exception class. So extends exception and nothing else. I'm just saving it. So I just created a class that is inheriting the exception class. And here what I will do is, here this is the place where I want to throw an exception. So here I will use the throw keyword, and then I will create a constructor, or I should say then I will pass an object of this contact exception class. So there are two ways to do that. First, create an object of that class. So contact exception CE is equals to new contact exception, and then just simply throw CE and save. So this is how you can create an exception and throw that specific exception. Now, instead of creating an object and then throwing this exception, I can certainly call this whole constructor over here. So I need not to create any temporary variable, and that would be all. So I saved it. So this contact utility class is saved, and now I can certainly create object of this specific class. Now let me show you whether it is working or not. So I am on my anonymous window, and here I am creating an object of contact utility, and in the constructor of contact utility I have to pass a last name. So let me go to my org and see a contact's last name. So here you can see there is a contact with the name Mr. Tom Ripley. So I will pass this Ripley because Ripley is the last name over here. And what this will do, it will actually have contact inside this record. Okay. So to explain this, what I will do is I will just simply come here and print this record so that it can assure that this specific record has been assigned. So now inside the class I am printing that record as well whenever I am assigning it. And now let me execute this. So if I will click on execute, so it executed successfully, and now you can come to debug only, and here you can see that specific contact is here. Now if I pass a specific last name which is not existing, let's suppose Tata, and let me click on execute, and now you can see it is throwing contact utility dot contact exception script thrown exception. So now it is throwing that specific exception. Now while creating the constructor of the custom exception class, I can even write some message over here. Like suppose contact does not exist and save. Now let me execute again, and this time it will show that specific message over here which is saying contact does not exist. So this is how we create our own custom exception, and this is one of the scenario which is explaining you the way you can utilize your custom exception. Now that marks the end of this session. See you soon in the next session. Till then, thank you and take care.